We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Excited to have you guys here. I have an awesome guest I'm going to be introducing momentarily. We're going to be talking health, wellness, a little entrepreneurship, good stuff. I've had a couple of these guests recently who, they're the types of people who, have really seen a change in their lives, with regards to health and the way they eat and exercise and all that stuff. And then that's good enough on its own, but they took it one step further and went into business to back their ideas with actual tangible products, which is really, really cool. So before I get to my guest, I do want to remind you about Masa Chips, one of my former guests who is disrupting the tortilla chip market. With Masa Chips, which are a tortilla chip fried in grass-fed beef tallow. None of that seed oil nonsense. Just delicious beef fat, and they're so good. You can pick up a bag of those today at masachips.com and just use promo code LIONS at checkout for 10% off. So check that out. And the only other thing I will say is today's episode, we do have a bonus segment with my guest. So we'll be getting into some more stuff. I think we went for about 20 minutes and we got into some interesting conversations. You're really going to enjoy it. You can hear the full conversation with the bonus and everything by signing up for our Patreon at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or at locals, lionsofliberty.locals.com. They would love to have you. Of course, if you join the Pride, you get the bonus content. You get Brian's weekday rants that he does pretty much 4 or 5 days a week. You get our other bonus shows that we have. And you get to join the Pride, the Lions of Liberty Pride. You get more stuff. I don't even know. I'm losing track of all of the incentives and things we have in the Pride. So the bottom line is, if you like the show, you should join the Pride. So with that being said, let's get to today's show. All right, I am live with Christian Bates to the Lions of Liberty Pride, and today, we're talking to Christian, and I've known Christian for a while through social media. I feel like I've known him, followed his posts and everything he's done with his company, Longevity Power, which we'll talk about. But we're also going to get into his personal journey towards liberty and also his health journey. He's someone who has lost in excess of 50 pounds and really changed the perspective on health and exercise in doing so. He's someone who is really passionate about and has dedicated his life to the pursuit of holistic health. And like a couple of my recent guests, has dabbled and experimented with a lot of different diets. So interested to hear about that. And now he's really chosen to be strong and flexible, to eat an ancestral-based diet and to build his lifestyle and his habits in a way to shield from a lot of these health-depleting things that we're surrounded by in this modern world. So, Christian, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Yeah, good to have you on the show. I've had you on my list to bring you on the show for quite a while. And then I saw, I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where you had a post talking about one of your longevity power products. And also I've been meaning to order some for a while. So I figured, why don't I order some? And then let's connect and bring you on. So happy to have you here. I think a good place to start, just to give my audience sort of a basis, a little bit of a background on who you are and where you come from. If you could start out just giving the generic, generic's not the right word, but the short sort of elevator pitch about who you are and what you're all about.
Well, I feel that my liberty journey and also health journey totally paralleled. Uh, Ever since I was 16, when I lost the 50 excess pounds, I also started to kind of get red pilled on nutrition and on the food
Hmm.
system, and at the same time on politics and propaganda at the same time, and uh, just kind of pieced together how I want to live my life from kind of an overlapping of those perspectives.
So, what was the trigger point for the political or philosophical shift in your ideas? Was it tied to the losing of the weight? Did that come first, or was there some other trigger?
So when I was 16, I was one of the chubbiest and shortest boys in my class. And then in 6 months, I cut back on like eating my favorite San Francisco sourdough baguettes and biking every day. And as I lost a little more weight, I started to run all the time. And this was back in 2002. So there wasn't much in the way of searching on the internet and like cross-referencing people's different experiences.
Hmm.
It was mostly reading books and taking the author's word for it. But I did prove to myself that a few things done well helped me go from 200 pounds to 150 pounds back then. And so I was really happy with that and just got so into the pursuit of health and nutrition and fitness. But I'd say I went through my like woke phase early back then. So I was part of the recycling club at school. I would like yell at people for not recycling, even though now I
Mm.
understand that most things like don't actually get recycled. It doesn't always make a difference. And um, started to go plant based, and then became a hardcore vegan by the time I
Mm.
was 17, and had a brief stint with kind of the the soy tofu veganism, and then I learned pretty early
That
on that
well, that
that's
was big. I mean, that was pretty much veganism back then, right? That was like
and
mainstream veganism.
yeah, I mean, it still kind of is. I
Is
mean,
it?
it's almost. I mean, the standard American diet, the standard industrial foods are
Hmm.
also like a soy plant-based thing.
Yeah.
They all kind of are based on the same disinformation and cherry pick science. But
Hmm.
I'll get to that in a little bit.
Sure.
And then I figured out that soy was terrible, so I went raw vegan. And by the way, there's no such thing as a real vegan diet. Um, all plant-based agriculture requires a huge culling of billions of animals all the time.
Hmm.
But I didn't know any of that back then, so I thought I was eating this like ancestral diet because I was in an echo chamber where people thought that humans were more these like frugivorous primates. And so for the next 8 years, I got deeper into the raw vegan diet. I launched a raw vegan superfood bar, and also got really into yoga. And I remember around 18, 19, someone asked me about my politics, and I thought like communism was obviously the best way. We got to share everything. You got to vote for. And then in 2009, I started listening to Alex Jones.
Mm.
Alex Jones had Ron Paul on. I immediately read two of Ron Paul's books.
Do you remember what led you to Alex Jones? Just out of curiosity, because I mean, I know a lot of people who were kind of started down the path by Alex Jones.
I was listening to a lot of uh, what's that one show? It's on late at night where it's all about conspiracy theories, and um,
Mm.
it's on the tip of my tongue, but it's all about like,
Oh
oh, do
well,
UFOs exist? Do all these alternate
yeah.
realities exist? And I think that they might have had Alex Jones on as a guest. And then Alex Jones had a lot of cool people on as guests, so I started to kind of get red pill. I voted for Obama in 2008, and immediately afterwards, I realized that that whole regime of politicians is actually evil and totally corrupt.
Hmm.
And then around 2011, I heard a speech from someone who had been eating vegan for over a decade, and he realized that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And he asked people, "Hey, do you know anyone who eats vegan healthfully for 1 year?" A lot of people raise their hands. How about 5 years? Fewer people. 10 years, 20 years. And the only last couple of hands left were people who knew long-term vegans, but they all had like neurological and other health issues. And I realized that, oh, actually humans are um, omnivorous hunter-gatherers living in a modern industrial world, and that
Yeah.
we should eat like that. And so I slowly added in animal products. At first, it was just like eggs and fish oil. And also, I was an active hot yoga teacher. I was a full-time yoga teacher. But in the long run, since I was mainly doing yoga as my exercise, and since yoga doesn't really have any pulling mechanisms to develop the muscles for pulling, it's mostly push and stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I was doing like long held lunges and building my quadriceps, and developed weak, loose hamstrings, which created a muscular imbalance in my knees. So I could barely even walk or run down hills. And so I
Wow.
started going to the gym.
That's interesting. That makes like perfect sense the way you explained it there, that you would, just by doing yoga, you would have deficiencies in certain areas. But I mean, I've never looked for it, but I've never heard of that from anyone else. Is that a common thing that happens to people who exclusively do yoga? Do you know?
For those that exclusively do it in the long
Yeah.
term, yes. It's so similar to the vegan diet in that a lot of people seem to get a lot of benefits briefly in the beginning and then develop long term issues.
Hmm.
So I'd say if someone's new to yoga, it's going to be great. You're probably going to do a lot of benefits, but you still want to do other exercises.
Yeah.
And so I started going to the gym and doing a weight resistance split routine. And within the first month of exercising my legs fully, including my hamstrings, my knee problems went totally away.
Hmm.
And also after like the first big weight training afternoon I came home and decided I'm going to have my first big like whole pound fillet of salmon. And I hadn't had fish in years. And I felt so grounded. I was just like, oh, this is what my body's been craving for
Yeah, it's
years.
brain food. Yeah.
Brain food, and also
Yeah.
the seed based products I was eating were technically full of seed oils, even though they weren't the industrial seed oils
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people are coming around to that are just totally toxic. So cottonseed oil, safflower, canola oil, the vegetable oils, soybean oil. I wasn't eating those, but I was still eating a lot of oils that had the same fatty acids. So an organic, fresh pressed sunflower oil or sunflower seeds still has a lot of those omega-6 inflammatory fats that I didn't realize I was suffering from until I started to piece things together later. And then I started adding in beef, and then eventually beef organs and more animal fats, and cranking up my weight training routine. And instead of doing yoga, I do more like gymnastic stretching now, which seems to actually get me to my flexibility goals more efficiently than trying to get to them by just complying in a yoga class. Like I can just go directly to what I want to do. And I feel like that going from that kind of blue pilled notion of nutrition, where I was like a woke vegan, into the more red pilled understanding of, no, actually, we're hunter gatherers. We need to eat ancestrally. We're designed to have most of our nutrition and calories come from high quality animal products. And then we piece things together from there with plant foods and mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And then actually in 2015, I started listening to the Lions of Liberty. You were my second libertarian podcast. First one was Roger Paxton's Lava Flow.
Oh, it was a great show.
Yeah, short-lived, but he had you guys on, or he had a guest episode of you guys for the libertarians in living rooms drinking liquor. And so I didn't even know about Tom Woods back then, but I was really into you guys and have been ever since.
That's cool. Yeah, actually, funny you bring up Roger. He so Roger kind of he stopped his podcast and he kind of dropped off the face of the earth, which is totally fine. And he went and I know for a while he was raising pigs up in New Hampshire.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if he's still doing that if he's still doing that, but he did just reappear on Facebook, and so he's doing well. I'm not sure what he's doing or where he lives now, but it's good to always to see Roger Paxton. He's a good lover of liberty.
Absolutely. I'd be curious what he's up to and where his like philosophy has taken him to.
Yeah, that I should maybe I'll try to track him down and bring him on the show. That'd be an interesting conversation. So I'm curious before we get into talking, more about diet and more about longevity power. I just want to talk about COVID for a little bit because I know that you were someone who was very outspoken during COVID on social media, and I just wanted and I'd forgotten that you're out in the belly of the beast there out in California. So I just wanted to hear what your COVID experience was like from that perspective, and how much were you able to sort of just live without being encumbered by the insanity of the California response.
There is definitely a lot of insanity. I live in a county that's like 97% vaccinated. But I do have several friends who immediately, within the first month after the lockdowns, pieced everything together and realized that this was all a sham. And some of those friends I went to the gym with, and the gym I used to go to, they had a little speakeasy in the early morning that also got busted by the cops a few times. And ultimately, the owner of the gym banned me. And that banning I wear as a badge of honor because I pushed back against the mask mandates. And I even like got a mask medical exemption from a therapist, and he wouldn't hear it, so he banned me. Luckily, I'm at a much better gym now. Although that gym also wouldn't let me inside without a mask for a while, but they had an outdoor area, so I was at least able to exercise a lot during the lockdowns. But it's concerning. There is a group of local freedom fighters, and they're all kind of like former liberals, since I'm in a liberal area. There's not that many like kind of right wing rural type folks, so it's all kind of like the hippies who are very based on their demands for freedom.
The old school freedom fighters. That's who used to be speaking out against these types of mandates back in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, and a lot of these people also, used to be the ones who would be like against vaccine mandates for children in schools, and were more hip to the corruption in the food system, and more aware of certain health awarenesses.
Yeah,
but I can't really. They're not hip on economics.
Yeah, that's so the one thing.
Some of their solutions are going to be for bigger government, and they're not quite as radical in some areas.
That's the one thing with people coming from the left. But I will say this: like, I'm much more willing to make build a coalition or have an alliance with someone coming from the left or coming from the right who I align with on being against the COVID regime, being against these mandates, who understands how evil these pharmaceutical companies are and how they essentially own our media. If someone understands that, I'm much more willing to build a coalition with them. However, I'm careful to build coalitions with people who might say, "Oh yeah, I'm with you on being anti-war," but then they're not with you on the pharmaceutical side of it or the COVID regime side of it, because those people just a couple of years ago gladly would have thrown me in a cage for not putting a mask on, and I can't have them in my foxhole. I don't know if you agree with that, but
I completely agree with the idea that as important as like political freedom, libertarian type concepts are, that's really like a subset of a greater understanding of how the world works, and of like social psychology, and kind of seeing through propaganda and questioning mainstream narratives, including ones that aren't necessarily like caused by big government. Like
Yes.
so many of our issues with food, like with seed oils, mainly seed oils exist now and haven't had much pushback because of, and this has been going on for over 100 years, because big agriculture, big business was able to pay off certain parts of government to the point of being able to cherry pick the science of different studies that have been done on, say, seed oils versus animal fats, and get that narrative going so that
Hmm.
now in the medical system and pretty much throughout everywhere in society, seed oils have been accepted, even though they're totally aberrant. So, yeah, I just as important and great as really understanding Austro-libertarian is,
Hmm.
I'm much more fascinated and interested in like just questioning like why we're here and what's going on, and questioning every pretty much everything, because pretty much every topic has been polarized. Like you name one thing and there's like the kind of a more red pill truthful understanding of it, and then there's kind of this propagandized narrative around it that isn't based on truth, but it's based on an understanding that makes that topic benefit the the ruling class,
Hmm.
and that incentive is so great that it can dominate the incentives for understanding the truth. And then of course there's going to be like mix mixes of those two understandings and kind of a controlled opposition. um, so I'd say that's true for pretty much everything. It's like I just want people who are really curious to go after like uh, what is really going on, rather than default to an ideology, whether that ideology be libertarianish um, or something that's just based on what they've been told.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I think people who do develop their ideology that way and kind of become just sort of like natural libertarians without the, maybe they haven't read Rothbard or Mises. I think a lot of times they're sort of better in navigating the propaganda because it's learned experience. Um, when you get those who are just basing everything on libertarian dogma, they have a hard time evolving as the world slaps them in the face. But I did want to dig in on seed oils a little bit more because they're in everything. I mean, it's hard to, you walk through a grocery store, you start looking at labels, you're going to see seed oils in almost everything. It's crazy. When you're obviously, I mean, when I say in a grocery store, in the interior aisles of a grocery store with all the processed and bagged and boxed food. If you're on the outer rim, fruits and veggies and meats and things like that, eggs, you can avoid the seed oils pretty well. But aside from this government influence, subsidies and whatnot, building up this industry, the corn lobby in Iowa is huge. But what purpose do a lot of these seed oils even serve being in food? I mean, I kind of have a theory. On the one end, it's for sort of like lubrication to help with the manufacturing with a lot of these bars and things. But what's your perspective on that?
So I think there are many things going on, and you kind of only need one thing to kind of explain everything, but there may be other things going on that can contribute
Mhm.
to it. So one of the first seed oils was cottonseed oil, because they had an abundance of cottonseed from making cotton. And so they figured out how to press this seed into an oil and use it as a machine lubricant or as a lamp oil. This is back in the 1800s. But then in the early 1900s, they figured out how to refine it and make it actually edible. And they called that Crisco, or crystallized cottonseed
Mhm.
oil. And they started to, advertise it and kind of gradually, because it was such a big industry and it was so cheap, there was just so much incentive to push this. And also, we're in an era now in the early 1900s where the concept of better living through technology, better living through chemistry was starting to become more and more of a thing. And so the idea that a technologically derived fat, people just were like, oh, it must be therefore better.
Mhm.
And then it wasn't until closer to like the 1950s that the seed oil businesses, which started to include uh, soybean oil and corn oil, just blew up. They went from millions of gallons to like billions, and started to push that narrative into like the American Heart Association and get otherwise brilliant people, including doctors, to just comply to this narrative. And part of the reason that it was easy to that like the scientific studies weren't like overtly saying no, seed oil is highly inflammatory. Seed oil actually contributes to coronary heart disease. Seed oil like destroys your nervous system by not properly nourishing your myelin sheaths. Is because you need long-term studies, and most of the studies were done for like under 5 years. And so if you study a group of people, even if you're really meticulous, like they did one study where they fed people identical food for years, except one food was made with like butter and lard and tallow, and the other was made strictly with vegetable oils. All the other
Mhm.
ingredients were the same. But in a short period of time, it's very easy to cherry pick and make the seed oils look good. And it's only until you do a much longer study, say 10 years or more, that you're able to prove that seed oils cause these diseases and this shorter life expectancy.
Which is incredibly hard to do a study like that over a long duration. I mean, it's just
Yeah. Now there are many studies. So the whole thing's thoroughly debunked now, but it did
mhm.
take decades. And
So it's
there could also be the idea that by dumbing the population down, by making
mhm.
that you're like the majority of your calories come from a food that is just so bad for your nervous system and hormones and metabolism that it makes for a dumber population. And I'm not
Mhm.
sure, like I would never put that kind of more conspiratorial thing. I think it exists. To what capacity, it's not always clear, but I think that there is that incentive, especially with the medical system. The more you feed people seed oils, the more chronic diseases there are. I don't know how much of that is emergent versus bad actors who know exactly what they were doing this whole time. It's probably some mixture of both.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you started telling that story about seed oil, starting with Crisco, and I mean, I remember my grandmother and my mother both using Crisco, and just when you taste it by itself, it just tastes horrible. I mean, it tastes absolutely awful. But when you think about, you were talking about why that came into being, because it was just so incredibly cheap. And I think libertarians, we fall into this trap where we're like, well, the free market will just work itself out. There's evil people who work at corporations who gladly will make millions and millions of dollars selling a inferior or a dangerous product if they're making money. That's not to say that I think everything should be government controlled, but it's to say we need to be very aware that corporations can do very, very bad things too. And a lot of times it's government and corporations coming together, kind of a marriage between the two, that's the worst recipe. But I guess my
It,
point of this rant is just because something's private, it doesn't mean it's necessarily a good thing.
yeah, we can never really know, but in an alternate universe where everything was the same except we had like small government and not nearly the corruption in the food industry and all the
Hmm.
backwards incentives that creates, would seed oils still have become a thing
Yeah.
that we would have, or would it have become less of a thing but still a thing that uh, caused a huge amount of the population issues? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I mean, it'd be interesting for someone to study this, not me. I don't have the time. But seed oils, I don't think at least are anywhere close to as prolific in like Europe as they are in the United States. And that may more have to do with just, the population bases in Europe, um, not moving around as much, living in the same area, having a more consistent diet. We're not as easily duped into, um, I'm just totally speculating, into using some of these products, or just these companies knowing maybe that they couldn't sell them there. But in the United States, you have a population that's migrating here. People are in unfamiliar territories. Everything's changing. It's a whole new world. You're introducing, the automobile. You're having electricity for the first time. It's all these different things happening. Sure, here's a new thing to eat. Here's a new thing to eat. I just wonder. I wonder how that played into it and factored in.
My understanding is that it's still a very big deal everywhere,
Really?
uh, including Europe. It's probably the worst for people in third world countries because they're eating like all cheap, for the most part, cheaper products and far fewer animal products. And so the worst thing about seed oil is not so much that it's been highly processed, it's that the omega fatty acids are inverted. So they've studied different, like more hunter gatherer cultures, and the fatty acid distribution of people's tissues is around 3 to 4% linoleic acid. Linoleic acid is the main omega-6 fatty acid. It's the highest fatty acid in most seed oils. Most seed oils are between 20 to 70% linoleic acid. And most animal fats are going to be well under 5 to 10%, sometimes well under 5%. Coconut oil is almost 0% linoleic acid. Um, like healthy fruit oils like avocado oil and olive oil, those are going to be like under 5 to 10%. But once you have this excess of linoleic acid, it builds up in your tissues, and it's telling your system to like store fat, and it messes up how our mitochondria work, and actually takes a while to replace. Because let's say you had a high seed oil diet your whole life, and then suddenly you started to eat a more ancestral diet where you switched from Crisco to tallow. Tallow, like
Mhm.
a really good tallow, by the way, looks like Crisco in that it's like this white
It
whipped uh,
it does.
substance.
It tastes a lot better though than Crisco. It tastes a lot
Uh,
different.
yeah, absolutely, and it's not refined at all.
Yeah.
It's just strained, really. But it still is going to take sometimes years to correct that fatty acid structure in one's cells, so that we get like our full metabolic health back.
Mhm.
So, like one big dose of a high linoleic acid or high seed oil meal, um, even if it's just an occasional cheat meal, kind of lasts in your system for a while. You can't just
Really?
immediately reverse it by having a healthy meal a few hours later. So it is
Well,
something to be concerned about.
that is something to be concerned about because it's hard to totally avoid seed oils. I mean, my wife and I, pretty much our philosophy is, we're not going to cook with that stuff. Obviously, we look at labels. We do the best we can to make sure we're not buying anything with seed oils in it. Things It's hard. Things do slip through. You go out to eat. I mean, you still want to be able to enjoy life, go out to eat, and you don't know what they're cooking with in the kitchen. Some places are starting to advertise, and I think this will become more abundant with places starting to tap into the marketing of not using seed oils, which will be a good thing. Um, there's a hat tip to the free market, but it's difficult. So you're saying that even going out to dinner once every 2 weeks or whatever, twice a month, is still going to have a nagging impact on your linoleic acid, or what kinds of? I mean, it's obviously going to help
I,
you more so than eating it every day, right?
I would say that it depends on the person, because some people are just really sensitive. Like for
Hmm.
me, I've had a lot of food sensitivities. So if I had any more than say a teaspoon of, and that's just my guess, of a seed oil was that got into a meal. So like when you cook in seed oil, sometimes a lot of that oil will end up in the food, sometimes not, sometimes it drifts off. So there's also that consideration. But it really depends on where you're at in your own health journey. Like if you've
Hmm.
had, if you have an autoimmune disorder, if you have metabolic issues that make it so that it's really hard to lose weight, or you might have to be far more restrictive to truly get your health goals happening.
Yeah.
But for some people that might just be unnecessary. There's a thing called orthorexia, and orthorexia is where you are so restrictive in your diet that the restrictiveness ultimately becomes a detriment. And I definitely had variations of doing that. My early on mentality with nutrition was, if I can be more restrictive, that's my path to health. But now
Hmm.
I kind of invert it, even though I do avoid a lot of things, but also replace those things with like super nutrient dense foods. My mentality now is, how do I make it so that I can have the most flexibility possible? Like I've always had a dairy sensitivity, not to the lactose, but to the casein. And once a company even asked me to formulate an ice cream for them. And I was like super stoked. I was like, okay, we're going to make this out of goat cream and make it the
Hmm.
best superfood ice cream possible. But I couldn't taste test it without just feeling awful all the time. And so I had to eventually turn them down and said, like, I can't do this. But I would love to figure out a way where, whether it's my gut microbiome or certain things about my body, where I could handle dairy again, especially
Hmm.
like the A2 milk, which has fewer of those casein allergens. And so I even though it is good to just like not eat certain things for a good long time because they're no longer serving you, it's also good to be like, all right, how do I still have massive nutrition abundance and enjoy every meal?
Yeah, no, that's and I mean, and milk is such a nutrient dense thing, especially raw milk, to be able to drink.
Yeah, and high
But
quality butter
yeah.
and cream
Hmm.
and colostrum. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're all basically an organ meat. Um, and I'm really into organ meat, so I'm into liver, you know, kidney, brain, connective tissue, so the bone broths. I think it's so good to eat nose to tail. And dairy technically is like a, a domesticated agriculture version of
Hmm.
ancestral eating.
So let's talk about eating organ meats and kind of lead that into what led you to founding your company, Longevity Power. So when did you start eating organs? And I mean, do you eat, try to eat some organs every day, a certain amount a
Yeah,
week, or like, do you have like a quota? How you do it?
I try to have it bare minimum, like a half an ounce a day.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll have a lot more. I've had like a pound of liver all at once. You probably shouldn't do that.
Isn't there like a downside to that though, with having like too much liver? Is
Yeah,
that's yeah.
liver has a lot of preformed vitamin A called retinol,
Hmm.
and there's a massive disagreement on this in like the paleo carnivore type communities. Some people think that your body can actually handle quite a bit, and some think that you should really be much more cautious with it. I think that I'm like a little bit to the, you can handle more than some people think, but don't go overboard, because a lot of the I mean, most people are deficient in preformed vitamin A, which is so good for your eyes and your immune system. I mean, it's a corner. It's like one of the top fat soluble vitamins that our body just needs. And when we don't get enough of that from animal products, and we only get the non-preformed carotene version from plant foods, so all the orange plant foods like yams are going to have beta carotene, but that's, your body still has to convert that, and it doesn't convert it super efficiently. So having the preformed is is still better.
Interesting. So what types of organs do you eat? Are you eating like beef liver, chicken livers, hearts? What types of organs?
My main animal that I eat is beef,
Hmm.
and I think that the ruminant animals, all the red meat animals, they have the best nutrition. They also have the best fats because of how their stomach is. They basically eat, grass and kind of a carbohydrate based diet that turns fatty acids into this higher saturated fat, lower omega-6 fat in their tissues. Whereas
Mhm.
the monogastric animals, so all poultry, pork, those are going to have a little bit more of the uh, omega-6 oils in their body, especially if they're primarily grain fed. And most scaled up farms, even if they're organic, are going to be mainly grain fed. So even like a large scale chicken farm, um, even if it's pasture raised, they probably can't make them all pasture raised where they're eating all insects, would be the biologically appropriate food for
Mhm.
chickens. They're still going to be giving them some amount of grain, and that's just going to be changing the fatty acid distribution of their tissues to a certain degree. You can see that in their eggs. The more grain a chicken is fed, the lighter the egg yolk, the more it eats insects and scraps from outdoors, the more their egg yolk will be dark orange, which
You know
has
that
to do
that,
with the
that
vitamin A.
that's interesting. I just learned that like a week ago that because somebody a listener of the show had posted on her Facebook that she has her own chickens and she can tell how much pasture time they get based on the color of the yolk. So that's a good thing to know.
Yeah, so I'm an aspiring hunter. I would love to eventually get so into hunting that I can do subsistence eating, where I'm eating a
Mhm.
lot of, say, venison or elk. But high quality beef, grass fed, and even the best would be grass finished, pasture raised beef. It's even though these are domesticated animals that are different from the wild auroch that is now extinct that cows come from, they're practically the same nutrition. And so I think that beef, as well as like grass fed lamb, is basically like a truly ancestral food that is just so optimized for human biology. So most of my organs are going to be coming from beef. I'll occasionally do chicken livers, but I think that the beef liver and beef kidney and beef bone broth and beef fat, and I'll even do beef brain, spleen, pancreas. My favorite is the thymus. The
Hmm.
thymus is right by the heart. It's basically the center of the lymphatic system. It's a glandular. It's along with the pancreas, is called a sweetbread because it doesn't have like a red meaty flavor. It has more of a soft, almost desserty
That's
flavor,
crazy.
like cheesy, and it has all these like cofactors that are great for your immune system. It's exquisite.
So how do you cook that, or are you eating it raw?
I mostly eat it powdered, so I get most of my
Okay.
organs just very conveniently powdered from New Zealand farms. But if you have it fresh, which you need to special order from a butcher or from a
Hmm.
farm, you could just pan fry it super fast
Yeah.
and cook it hot and rare.
So let's talk about longevity power and really the line of supplements that you've developed there. Um, when did you start it, and what was what was the idea, the driving force behind it?
So I launched way back when I was only 20 and didn't know anything about business. I co-launched a bar I created called the Wild Bar, which was a superfood meal replacement bar. It was called the Wild Bar because it had wild blue green algae in it, and it was made with all the ingredients that I was loving back then in my vegan days.
That's a great name, by the way.
It
Wild
is,
Bar. Yeah.
and someone took it. Someone has a new Wild Bar with a completely
Oh.
different formula now. And but I licensed it to a business that did really well with it for a couple of years and then kind of ran it into the ground. And I realized, okay, I should really own my own business. And in and I launched Longevity Power in 2012. And at that time, I was getting really into this kind of other missing food group. So if like organs are kind of a missing modern food group, the adaptogens are also something that we would eat ancestrally that a lot of people don't know about. So adaptogens are herbs and functional mushrooms that
Hmm.
help your body to adapt to stress. They have anti-fatigue factors. They're great for your immune system and brain function. And I found that most of the adaptogens on the market that I was consuming were not as potent or as quality or as well priced as I wanted. A lot of them were in capsules when I was really into making like drinks out of like drink instant powders. And so I developed some products that were all about the highest quality adaptogens in a comprehensive way in like drink mix form. Launched that with Longevity Power, and I've been doing that for 11 years now. And then last year, I finally launched my ancestral organ powder mix line. And so now I'm able to, which feels really good because I'm so into like animal foods, but I was selling mainly plant and mushroom foods. It felt a little bit disconnected because as much as I love
Hmm.
adaptogens, I really like to talk about like the animal stuff. So now I can talk about both freely and have something to offer people.
That's really cool. So where are the powders sourced from? You were saying you ordered. Do you get it from New Zealand? Is that,
Yeah,
or
the
is it
organ
a different
powders are
source? Yeah.
from New Zealand. My bone broth protein powder is from Sweden, and it's all pasture raised, grass fed beef.
How hard was it to set up this operation? I mean, to start any sort of supplement company, I know can be, pretty difficult from a, resource standpoint, from, producing it. So can you talk a little bit about how you overcame those obstacles?
There's always overcoming. There's always going to be changes in updates and sourcing. Um, I just I just do what I can. I'm pretty small scale still, so all of
Hmm.
our production is small batches. I would love to dramatically scale up, and that I will eventually, very soon. And I just believed in myself, like think I can do this, and um, yeah, there's always going to be more things I can do. Eventually, I want like a full on GMP facility.
Hmm.
But that's like now we're talking, and I'd have to like 100x to get there, but I will.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like when I had on the founder of Masa Chips a couple weeks ago, and they're at the point where they're still making all of their tortilla chips by hand. Those are the chips that are fried in grass-fed beef tallow.
Hmm.
um, but yeah, it's kind of like, of course you want to grow, but you're not really ready to grow because you couldn't meet the demand. You don't want to just have orders you can't fill. So that's kind of a tricky dynamic to growing a company.
Yeah, and a lot of companies they do it by getting funding, partnering with different companies. I haven't done that. I've been
Hmm.
the main guy. I wear all the hats, but I'm ready to build a team and do whatever the next step is, for scaling up.
Yeah, that's awesome. um, So we're going to go to the bonus show here in a minute. I did just want to get a general opinion from you on. Um, I mean, the shift I've done in my show. You've been listening to me for years, so you understand what happened. I started out talking about criminal justice system during COVID, with everything happening. I pivoted to this show, Finding Freedom, and obviously talking to people like yourself who are very passionate about health and wellness and really taking ownership of that aspect. My question for you is, how important do you think, you know, to people who do have a liberty mindset, to people who do understand the philosophy of liberty, how important is it that they are pairing that with, um, taking care of their own bodies, of nourishing, their bodies with food that is not poison, that is not, seed oils, that is not, little Debbie's cakes and things like that. How important is that marriage of the ideas of liberty with, the practical application of, living a healthy life?
I think that they go together. I think that there are definitely a lot of people who have excelled in the liberty space and not, paid that much attention to their health. But I think, eventually that's going to come to a point where they'll have to deal with their health.
Hmm.
and that might, take away from their capacity to do what they're doing. So I think that, you know, there's all these different sayings. If you think healthy food is expensive, try, getting sick or time in the
Yeah.
hospital. Um, I think that being able to wrap your mind around important topics of freedom and being, a sovereign, autonomous, independent, healthy, grassroots type person, which has so much to do with eating and being healthy. They all really are overlapping more and more, and I really think that they're kind of one and the same.
Hmm. And definitely not Stephen Ellis, who's watching along here, has a great point. Others are more likely to take advice from healthier people. I definitely agree with that, and I forget where I heard this or who said it, but I've probably heard it from multiple places. But someone who can't control what they're eating, what goes in their mouth every day, what they choose to eat at meals, you're going to follow that person to to make decisions and lead you in other aspects of life. Um, I don't know, just something to consider. But so before I let you go, I do want to let you once again, plug longevity power, plug anything else that you
Well,
have, your social or anything.
and I'll add one more thing.
Sure.
Um, all the crap food and the toxins that we're exposed to that are just unleashed wholesale by the thousands of chemicals by big corrupt corporations throughout the world. In order to take a stand against those, we do need to take a stand personally in our own lifestyle to push away those things. Otherwise, we
Hmm.
have like the mark of the beast on us. Otherwise, we're um, taking it when in fact we're also trying to take a stand against it.
Yeah, it's like if you're taking the jab and you're saying, but we have to stop with these jabs. Then you get another jab. We got to stop with these jabs. Yeah, it doesn't align.
Yeah.
Great point. Your
Uh,
plugs, plug away.
longevitypower.com is the main place you can find me.
Hmm.
I have blogs there all about thinking differently about health, and I have my products there. I'm on Instagram. My personal Instagram is based with Bates. So based with Bates, and just put a lot of memes out there. And yeah, that's mainly where people can go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and we're going to get in the bonus here in a minute. In the bonus, I do want to dig more into th- how vegans have kind of been misled and think they're doing a great thing for the environment, and sort of this animal culling aspect of veganism you talked about. I also want to talk more about your diet, what you eat, and kind of that, and maybe some of your exercise routine too. So we will get to that in the bonus show. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks so much, John.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Christian Bates. And like I said at the top of the show, I love having on liberty minded, freedom minded individuals who are entrepreneurs, who are disrupting the health space, especially, and are fighting back against really what obviously the government has done no favors with their food pyramid and misinformation, and public schools misleading children on what to eat and what is good and what is bad. And of course, the recommendations for what's healthy. That's all been bad. But also, corporations have been just as bad. Profiting off these hyper palatable hyper palatable foods, and pushing stuff that is not good for you in order to make money. So just because something's a private company doesn't mean it's good. So like I said, during the end there with Christian, support people like Christian, support people who are starting businesses, who actually stand, number one, you agree with them ideologically, which is awesome, but they're creating a product that can help you feel better and help you live a better, healthier life, but also have a longer life, longevity power, if you will. So hopefully you guys enjoyed our conversation, and hope you make it over to hear the bonus show. Some good topics discussed there. And you can check that out by joining at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. And I hope you all have a great week, a healthy week, and always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.